Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast. I am Ben McKee, and I'm joined by Patrick Brown on this Monday, January 5th edition of the podcast. Boy, do we have a lot to talk about. Ryan Callahan will join us on the second segment of this podcast to break down all the latest transfer visits that Tennessee is hosting. Tennessee is hosting several on this Monday as we speak. So Ryan unable to join us as Pat and I are recording this afternoon, but Ryan is going to join us later tonight, which of course now by the time you are listening or watching this has already happened. Hopefully news does not break while Patrick and I are recording earlier in the day and things don't change between now and then. Because it has been a mile a minute the last several days. It's been one thing after the next. Do not leave your phone for more than 5 minutes. And even at 5 minutes, that is very risky because it seems like news has been coming left and right since the portal opened on January 2nd. We've got, as I mentioned, plenty to discuss. And as you can imagine, Tennessee has a new defensive staff that has been made finalized since the last time we spoke. It has also landed its first commitment out of the transfer portal, and there's also been a bevy of players decide to leave Tennessee. So Patrick and I have plenty to discuss here in this first segment before we get Ryan on here in the second segment to discuss the latest visits that are happening for the Vols. First, Patrick, Happy New Year. Haven't talked to you since last year officially on the podcast. How are you doing? Are you surviving portal season? Because I don't know how you feel about it. I knew personally what I was expecting. I knew it was going to be a lot. I knew I needed to be seated, buckled into the roller coaster, and somehow it has even far surpassed those expectations.
Well, I think Tennessee fans need to do what you inevitably did during the Steelers-Ravens game on Sunday night. You've got to ride the ups and the downs. Yes, congratulations on your NFC North title, or AFC North, sorry. But yeah, I mean it's going fast. There's a lot of names, a lot of visitors. Some guys that you have lined up for visits don't get there because you're not the first visit. Sometimes that matters in portal recruiting. Sometimes it doesn't. They've got some guys on campus. Had some guys on campus this weekend. They have some guys on campus on Monday. And so, yeah, and then there's the quarterback situation, which is sort of looming over everything. It seems pretty quiet on that front at this point. So, yeah, it's been pretty wild. Did get to start the new year with my boys turning 5. My twin boys are now 5 years old. Had our first basketball practice on Saturday. So, trying to juggle some of the usual stuff with life, with everything that's going on with Tennessee football. And it's been an off-season of change. You didn't even mention that Tennessee's going to have a new strength coach with them deciding not to renew Kurt Schmidt. It's almost like that seems like it was 3 weeks ago, and it was New Year's Day. That was, we're recording on the 5th. So far this offseason has been like that crazy football game that has like a million things happen, and you can't even keep up with all of it. But we're trying to keep up with it the best we can on GoVols247. And so keep it locked to the side and listen to our podcast as well as we try to keep you guys updated and fresh on what's going on.
Yeah, it's difficult, but our guy Ryan Callahan is doing a great job of keeping track of all the visits and the players coming and going. So make sure you are locked into GoVols247.com. Let's start with the quarterback position. I'm going to throw you a fastball because neither of us, before we press record, talked about us needing to talk about this, but probably do need to at least share a thought on it because, yes, Tim Banks is gone. There's a new defensive staff. There's a new strength coach, but whether or not you successfully fill, I guess, the starting quarterback position will have a big effect on whether the defense and strength coach is successful next season. It's the most important position in all of sports, and it's just so important that Josh Heupel nails that decision this offseason. I think we're now, at least in terms of the progression of the quarterback conversation, we're all in agreement and past the part of, okay, recognizing that Tennessee needs to go get a transfer quarterback. But what are you, or where are you at in terms of some of the rumors that we've seen with potential targets at that position. And honestly, I mean, I guess the toothpaste is
There's
out of the tube. I mean, Tennessee's even flirting with Ty Simpson, maybe, which is weird because he's not in the portal, and I don't mind sharing that or talking about it out loud because it's been reported by Tom Loy of 24/7 Sports that Ty is mulling over whether or not to enter the draft, and that he's heard that Oregon and Tennessee have been linked to Ty Simpson if he doesn't decide to enter the draft. So I'm asking a big question, a loaded question, but your thoughts on the Ty Simpson chatter, I guess, and some of the other quarterback names that we have heard so far?
Yeah, Ben, I think it's kind of like two wild card situations kind of playing out right now. And to use a phrase that Ryan put on our board, I think whatever day it was, who knows what day it is. I think it might have been Sunday night. It doesn't sound like Tennessee has any irons in the fire, so to speak, in terms of portal quarterbacks right now. So I guess the wild card situations are kind of the one you mentioned with Ty Simpson. What is he going to do? Does he get the grade he needs to go to the NFL draft? Does he go back to Alabama, or is Alabama ready to move on? Does he go in the portal and see what the market is? That's a sort of a wild card situation. I think Tennessee's probably monitoring it, but so is everyone, right? And that, potentially, I guess that could play into Tennessee's favor if most of the quarterback board is picked clean. But the other wild card situation is Joey Aguilar, and certainly again to kind of illustrate how crazy this start of this month has been. Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network reported that Joey was playing with like a tumor in his arm and had a surgery on it, and like that was, that's like would be major news if it had been reported on December 13th or whatever. But because it's happening under the slew of everything else that's going on, it almost appears on our front page for a little while and then it's gone. So, but again, I'm not going to venture a guess on when the federal court system might issue a ruling. There was some movement on that case. Obviously, Aguilar has attached his name to the Diego Pavia lawsuit. I can't even keep my quarterback straight right now. That is trying to eliminate junior college seasons from counting towards NCAA eligibility. In which case Aguilar would have one more season because he's only played 3 at the FBS level. It's different from the Trinidad Chambliss case. I've seen that asked by Tennessee fans on the checkerboard on our side if the ruling that the Ole Miss quarterback might get will impact Joey's at all. I don't believe so. I think that's a different situation. He's trying to get a extra year from a medical red shirt from something that happened earlier in his career at, I believe, at Ferris State. And so he's not a junior college guy, so he's not necessarily attached to that. But I've always kind of thought that Aguilar, that ruling would be in his favor because it was last year, right? This is the same, and his lawyers and the lawyers on that case, they filed a motion, or I don't know the legal term, the day after Christmas, citing the NCAA approving eligibility for a basketball player that Baylor took, right? You probably have a little bit more of a better understanding of that than me, but saying, hey, if the NCAA is granting eligibility to a guy that played professional basketball and is 23, why are they trying to shortchange these older junior college guys just because they went to junior college? That's sort of the statement they're making, and they're basically asking the court to extend the waiver that the NCAA passed down for Pavia. So all that to kind of get off track there, but I think that's the other wild card is I think if that gets cleared. I think if they get a ruling there, then Tennessee probably would like to have Joey Aguilar back, and he probably would like to be back too. But my question always was going to be the timing, right? And if this was all going to get done by the start of the portal window opening on January 2nd or early enough, we'll see. I'm not going to venture a guess on when the federal court or a federal judge might rule on something either way. But I do think that's a situation that's still out there for Tennessee. Like I said, doesn't sound like they have any transfer quarterbacks lined up. There's been some rumblings with Sam Leavitt. He's going elsewhere. Obviously, Brendan Sorsby was sort of the talk back in December. He's committed to Texas Tech after visiting there in LSU. There's been some talk with Anthony Calandria, the UNLV quarterback who was the Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year. Some talks of a visit. Hasn't materialized. He's gone to, I think, Florida State. And I think there's another place he's going. So it doesn't sound like Tennessee has anything imminent on the quarterback front in terms of the portal. And a lot of these guys are coming off the board. So it's sort of an interesting situation. And I don't know if it's because Tennessee doesn't view some of those quarterbacks what the market does, right? I mean, you're not gonna pay somebody $4 million if you don't think they're worth it. Not to mention they've got a lot of resources tied up in George McIntyre and Faison Brandon as well, or a situation where they think, hey, we need to invest the resources we have on other positions, running back, offensive line, defense. So it could be a combination of all those things, but it's I don't think anything's any clearer on the quarterback front than it was a few days ago, but we'll have to see kind of how it plays out and how a couple of those wild card situations, if they go certain ways, then Tennessee will have an answer there, but I'm not sure what the answer is at this point.
It almost seems, because of what you just detailed with how many quarterbacks are coming off the board, I mean, it almost seems like best case scenario, Joey Aguilar does get an extra year of eligibility, unless something that at the time of this recording doesn't seem likely comes out of left field. Ty Simpson decides to stay in college and enters the portal, or all of a sudden they do become big players for Sam Levitt or the UNLV quarterback or somebody else that we're not even talking about just yet. So it's fascinating. I have made no bones
that
about.
could be the right move if it works out that way. That's obviously a big if, right? If you get Joey back, you have some continuity there. He knows his receivers. He knows this offense. He could get a full offseason. I think Rappaport said he's 8 weeks out after the surgery. So maybe iffy if he's fully go for spring ball in that case. But I mean, you could potentially give him. I mean, you're going to have to pay him more than you did this season, given how well he played and his value to you. But you wouldn't have to pay him. I mean, he would certainly come probably less than you would have to pay Ty Simpson if that situation materialized itself, right? And so you could use those funds to bolster other parts of your football team.
You could, and I think that would, just looking at everything right now, as I mentioned, I think that may end up being best case scenario. Now, looking at the strength coach and Josh Heupel's decision to part with Kurt Schmidt, what were your thoughts on Heupel's decision to part with the guy that he's only known at Tennessee?
And even before that, I mean, it's his only strength coach he's had in 8 years as a head coach. So the narrative that Josh Heupel will, is loyal to a fault and only hires his friends or all that stuff can be, I think, put to the side, given he's fired in the span of a few weeks the only defensive coordinator he's had at Tennessee and the only strength coach he's had as a head coach. So I thought Kurt Schmidt, I think he did a pretty good job his first several seasons at Tennessee. I mean, you look at how they played, defensive line, pretty strong, right? Good run defense, good run game. You saw some guys really go out at the NFL Combine and put up some eye-popping numbers. I think that speaks to some of the development of those players. You got to recruit some guys like that too, but you've also got to kind of develop those traits and things like that. So, but it was, and we kind of touched on this, I think, after the Vanderbilt game, especially, Ben, just how many times this season was Tennessee the less physical team, particularly in the line of scrimmage. Your run defense kind of tanks there, and it's kind of hard to, I guess, quantify physicality other than the eye test, right? But I think you just look at, this is the lowest rushing output at Tennessee that Josh Heupel has had, and that's you can point to the offensive line, you can point to, hey, they didn't have Dylan Sampson or Jalen Wright. Not that Deshaun Bishop is, I think he's proven a lot of people wrong, myself included. But just the way they were kind of pushed around on the offensive line, you look at the most physical teams they played, they lost to: Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia. But it's odd because they were, they went toe to toe with Georgia in that game not that long ago. So I do think that's an area that I think Josh Heupel viewed that he needed to upgrade. And so they're not going to renew his contract, and they'll be looking for a strength coach. It wasn't as pressing as the defensive staff, I don't think. They don't start classes until January 20th, which is still a couple weeks away. So I think there's still some time for Josh Heupel to sort of sort through his options there and have somebody in place for when the team gets back. And there'll be some guys that come back early from their break, but in my experience, college football players, they don't get so many breaks. So when they get one like this, they're gonna use it and go home and kind of relax and reset before coming back to start the offseason.
Yeah, a lot of people were rightfully spending their energy on Tim Banks and the need for Josh Heupel to replace his defensive staff, and Josh Heupel absolutely needed to, but I think it'll fly under the radar that in terms of the staffing, the strength and conditioning transition is more important, just because the physical nature of your football team is developed by your strength coach in these couple of months coming up, that really set the tone for your upcoming season. So these players spend more time than with the strength coach more than any other coach in the building, as much as their individual position coach, if not more. And the strength coach sets the tone for the program. And so I agree. I don't know that Kurt Schmidt was doing a bad job. He was doing a pretty solid job, but pretty solid is not good enough. And I think pretty solid is what led to Tennessee not being the most physical team on the football field in a couple of different games. And even the bigger issue that has been an issue under Josh Heupel throughout his entire coaching career as a head coach is the discipline aspect of things. Tennessee is not disciplined enough whatsoever. We saw it in grand fashion against Illinois with jumping off sides there to give Illinois more of a manageable 3rd and short to pick up
Right.
and run the clock down and kick the game-winning field goal. And your strength coach doesn't determine the penalty number on Saturdays, but he sets the tone along with Josh Heupel in terms of the discipline within the program, and that is something that needs to be fixed. So Kurt Schmidt, yes, that conversation was out there, but not as prominent as the Tim Banks conversation, and I think it's just as important as the Tim Banks conversation, if not even more important. So I think Josh Heupel is making the correct move there, and very curious to see who he decides to go out and get. There are a couple of guys out there, strength coaches out there that do have ties to Tennessee that Heupel could potentially go after. And again, it'll be interesting to see who he tries to land, because I think that hire is just pivotal, just as much as the quarterback conversation and the defensive coordinator hire, just absolutely pivotal that Heupel makes the right hire there because of how the strength coach sets the tone for your program. Looking at the defensive staff, let's go level by level of the defense because you do have 3 new coaches on that side of the ball. Rodney Garner and William Inge are retained, which Rodney Garner, we expected him to be retained going into the bowl game. Don't know that we expected William Inge to be retained those couple of days going into the bowl game. So that was a bit of a change. At least it was for me. But again, we'll go level by level of the defense and start with Rodney Garner and then Andrew Jackson, who is Tennessee's new Leo coach, replacing Old Hickory himself, replacing Chop, aka Laverne Harbin, as Tennessee's outside linebackers coach, Leo position, however you want to term it. Your thoughts on Jim Knowles' decision, which I'll add quickly. Good on Josh Heupel for allowing Jim Knowles to piece together the defensive staff that he wanted. I think that was critical, and Josh needing to be a CEO there, trusting Jim Knowles, a great defensive mind, to bring in his guys who he wants to have coaching on that side of the ball. So good on Josh Heupel. Not that I thought that he wasn't going to do it, but you just never know. So good on him for following through with that, I guess. But we'll start with Rodney Garner and Andrew Jackson along the defensive line, and your thoughts there.
Yeah, I actually thought, to your point on Inge, I left Nissan Stadium thinking they were going to clean everybody out, honestly. And so Inge does get kept. And with Rodney Garner, he actually, we find out after the fact again, because Tennessee is just how they release these things. Rodney signed his contract extension before Christmas. So I believe it was December 20th. So when we're in Nashville talking to Nathan Robinson, and he's like, yeah, I mean, we got to have Coach G back. I think a lot of guys would be upset if he wasn't. He had been locked in, which at that point officially, it just wasn't out there yet. Kind of like Tennessee didn't put out that William Inge and half the staff that was supposedly on expiring contracts actually signed extensions in the spring. Anyways, and Rodney Garner's getting he got a raise too, so he's making $1 million. That's pretty high for a defensive line coach, but I think he's probably proven his value. I don't think the defensive line played great last season, I'll say that. But that's maybe a different conversation for a different day. But certainly Rodney Garner has been very valuable to what Tennessee has done under Josh Heupel. And so regardless of the defensive coordinator, and I think he was even hired before Tim Banks was brought on. So he's sort of a mainstay of the staff and was going to stay. Andrew Jackson is and we'll get to the secondary coach guys too here in a second, but worked with Jim Knowles at Penn State as the assistant defensive line coach last season. So there's familiarity. That's obviously a trend with each of these 3 hires with Knowles. They all worked with him in the past, so he knows what they're getting, and they know what he wants to teach to run his defense. So that I think that should help the message be pretty, singular, right? You're not gonna there's not going to be inconsistencies in what you're getting from your defensive coordinator versus what you're getting from your position coach if you're a player. And he's a guy that's been he's maybe a little bit more experienced, sort of in between a couple of other guys they brought in, because he was the defensive line coach at West Virginia for 4 seasons. Coach Dante Stills, who was an All Big 12 player there. And actually, he kind of got started under Bob Shoop, which is sort of interesting. He was a graduate assistant at Penn State in the mid 2010s with when Shoop was there, and then was at Mississippi State after Shoop left Tennessee after the Butch Jones era flamed out badly. So he was there as I think a quality control coach when they had Jeffrey Simmons, when they had Montez Sweat and that defense that was pretty stacked in 2018. So he's been in the SEC. He knows what it looks like to be really strong on the defensive line at that position in this conference. So I think a pretty good hire there. And I think, for Tennessee, they needed to have all these in place as the portal window opened, and they were able to do that. So I think that was a good move to keep Garner and to bring Jackson in. Again, we'll kind of see if he can do a little bit better job. I know Chop was really important as a recruiter. Don't think that position, again, played that great this season. I think Joshua Joseph started out really well, but again, didn't have a sack after the first 5 games. Caleb Herring flashed here and there, but never quite lived up to the production. Jordan Ross flashed too, but didn't quite have the numbers to back up. And now Herring's going in the portal, and Jordan Ross is still kind of up in the air what he's going to do. So a chance to bring in somebody new there, I think was something that Knowles needed. And maybe I haven't dived into this, Ben, but I wonder if the Leo spot in his defense is maybe a little bit different than what it was under Tim Banks. Body type, responsibilities, techniques, all those things. So he probably felt it was important to have somebody at that position that was a little bit more familiar with what he wants to do schematically.
In the secondary, Jim Knowles elects to bring in Michael Hunter Jr. as the corners coach, and then Anthony Poindexter as the co-defensive coordinator, and also a secondaries coach. He will assist there in the secondary. I would assume with the safeties, since Michael Hunter Jr. is going to be working with the corners. But interesting that Poindexter gets the co-defensive coordinator title. I don't believe he had that at Penn State. Oh, he did have that? Okay. Because I found it interesting because we were kind of waiting to see if Louisville was going to hire him to be their defensive coordinator. So I made sense that, okay, not going to take the DC job at Louisville, but here's the co-DC title at Tennessee, along with just that secondary title, but specifically working with the safeties.
Yeah, Ben, I think Poindexter is sort of I don't say the cherry on top, but I think he's the one that makes the staff look really sharp, because he's very accomplished at all levels of his football life. I mean, he was a All-American at Virginia, is in the College Football Hall of Fame as a player. I mean, I think that's got to be pretty appealing to any portal or high school safeties, that you want to get coached by a guy who did it at the highest level. He won a Super Bowl with your rival, the Baltimore Ravens. I think he was on that team back in, I don't know what year it was, but he's got a Super Bowl ring too, in addition to being in the College Football Hall of Fame. And then you look at what he's done in his coaching career. It's pretty impressive too. He was at Virginia, where he played for more than a decade, coached several positions, special teams, running backs, the secondary, safeties. And he goes to, I think, UConn, then Purdue, and then at Penn State, he actually, in sort of a full circle kind of moment, he actually replaced Tim Banks for 5 years ago, as odd as that sounds. So he goes from Purdue to the co-DC safeties coach, and had been in that role for the past 5 seasons under a couple of different defensive coordinators that the Nittany Lions had. But coached with Jim Knowles last year. So, again, those guys know each other. They worked together for a year, so there's going to be familiarity there. There's going to be constant messaging in terms of teaching and installing this new defense. So, and then you look at his player development at safety. I think Penn State had 4 safeties drafted in the last 3 years. We'll see if they add to that total here this season. So, I think that's a really strong hire. A guy that's played at the highest level. His development as a safeties coach is really, really good. When you look at what he did at Penn State, obviously they were really good on defense regularly under James Franklin. At Purdue, I think he took a walk on and made him a 3-time All Big Ten player. Obi Melifanu was a guy that played at UConn, was like a second-round pick at safety. So he's got guys that you can point to and say, hey, I took this guy and developed him. And so I think that's pretty appealing in addition to the familiarity angle with Jim Knowles. And then you look at Michael Hunter Jr. Again, the theme here is familiarity. He worked with Jim Knowles at Oklahoma State for a season and then at Ohio State for a season. It was that 24 season when the Buckeyes won the national title. So again, he knows, they know each other. They know, the system, they know what to expect. And he does have a year sort of on his own at Tulsa, where he was the, I guess, defensive passing game coordinator and coached the cornerback. So I think he's sort of the younger of the three hires, but again, somebody that Knowles knows, and he knows Knowles and how to teach that system and what they need at that position. So I really like this defensive staff. Again, time will tell, right? I mean, there's that sort of knock or that notion that Jim Knowles' defense takes a year to sort of marinate before it really takes off. And, does Tennessee have a year to be patient, right? Coming off an 8-5 season. But I do think that, as we sort of talked about during the entire season, Ben, I think they needed to freshen things up. So they're able to do that with a new defensive coordinator who, like you said, is able to bring in some of his guys that he knows. And Jim Knowles has coached for almost 40 years. So he has a pretty long list of guys that he knows. And he taps into some recent connections there. But you also keep a really valuable coach on your staff in Rodney Garner. And then you keep a guy in William Inge who, from what we sort of heard, is somebody that's liked by a lot of the players on defense. And certainly, they thought highly enough, and Josh Heupel thought highly enough of him to make him the interim defensive coordinator for the Music City Bowl. I don't think that's necessarily, that was not nothing. I should maybe put it that way. But so they're able to keep some guys that maybe doesn't lead to a bigger, we'll get to the portal departures here in a minute, but, you're maybe able to keep some guys with the coaches you keep, but you're also able to sort of freshen things up at some positions where you think you need to get better.
And it seems like you're already reaping the benefits of having Jim Knowles and his new assistants on campus. You mentioned earlier that it was important for Tennessee to have those defensive staff members in place before the portal began. And as I just mentioned, it seems like they are already benefiting from that, because you already have your first commitment from a defensive back who is not a household name throughout the country amongst college football fans. But when you put on the tape, you like what you see.
Yeah, and Qua Moss from Kansas State, sort of a fast-rising guy, because 2 years ago he was at West Georgia, which was a D2 program that was transitioning into the FCS. He goes and has a really productive year there, translates that into a portal shot, or shot at the Power 4 level with Kansas State, and then goes and plays pretty well at the Big 12 level. And we have some transfer analysis on him from Cooper Patagna, our portal insider, and the guy that's sort of spearheading our rankings. And he said that there's a lot to like about Moss. He's tough, dependable, instinctive player, likes to play near the line. And I probably buried the lead here, but Moss is he's your plug and play guy at nickel, star, whatever they call it in Jim Knowles' defense. That's going to be his position. That's where he played at West Georgia. That's where he played at Kansas State. I think he's about 5'11", 190, 195-ish. So not a safety build, but a guy that sort of plays fearless when you look at how he plays. And Cooper Patagna told me on Sunday that instinctive, sort of fearless kind of player. Maybe that size sometimes impacts him when he's, fitting in the run game and closer to the box. But and he was more of a zone guy at Kansas State. We'll see again how Jim Knowles wants to piece together the defense and whether they like to play zone or man more. So there's some things he can improve as part of his game. But a guy with 20-something starts and some production as well when you look at tackles for loss, some sacks, some interceptions, some plays on the ball. So I really like this pickup. I think he's only a 3-star, only ranked the 28th safety in the portal for our rankings. But I think particularly in secondary, as odd as it sounds, given they just overhauled the coaching staff there, they've done a pretty good job in the portal, right? I mean, Jermod McCoy was, started as a freshman at Oregon State, wasn't a household name. Colton Hood had a good year at Colorado, but wasn't a big name. He was a 3-star transfer. McCoy was a 4-star transfer for us. But those guys come in and play at a really high level. So I think that should be, I think there should be maybe a benefit of the doubt. Plus, I think Qua Moss has proven that he can play at a pretty good level. And I think he saw a fit there with Tennessee and a new staff there. And he's going to be sort of the guy that comes in for Jalen Murray, who had a pretty productive season and fills that spot. So if you're looking at needs that Tennessee needed to address, certainly the secondary was one with safety anyway. And now I think you probably had cornered that with Ricky Gibson leaving. But Starr was one too that was sort of maybe not as, I don't say overlooked, but it's easy to group safety and corner and forget that one in the middle. And that's an important position in a lot of defenses. And I think Tennessee got a pretty solid addition here with Qua Moss to fill that spot.
And they have had several other defensive backs on campus and are in the process of hosting them as well. We'll get Ryan's thoughts on that position here in the second segment. Before we get to Ryan, do want to briefly discuss some of the portal departures Tennessee has had. There's a lot to name off. Guys like Bennett Warren, William Satterwhite, Max Anderson, and others, Emmanuel Okoye. We could go on and on and on. But the key ones that stick out to me, Patrick, is Lance Hurd, Ricky Gibson III, and Caleb Herring. Those are the three that stand out the most to me. Lance Hurd, I believe that was the decision.
And the kicker.
And the kicker, Max Gilbert. Yes, that is a significant one as well. Again, forgive me. There's just a lot to keep up with.
Yes, lots of names.
All the comings and goings. And Max Gilbert announces on Friday, I believe it was, that he is entering the portal, which was expected. It was in the interest of both parties to go their separate way. And 2 days later, he is committed to Arkansas. Naturally, Tennessee plays Arkansas this upcoming season on October 10th. So let the battered Vol fan syndrome kick in and understand that Max Gilbert is going to go 3 for 3, 5 for 5, and absolutely hit a game-winning kick that will probably be from beyond 50 yards. But Max Gilbert already headed to Arkansas. But then aside from the kicker, which Tennessee is now in the market for, I would assume that they don't rely on Josh Turbyville. I guess technically that would be an option, but would be surprised if they don't bring a kicker in. But anyways, Lance Hurd, Ricky Gibson III, and Caleb Herring. Lance Hurd, that was just essentially a salary cap situation. He was asking for a lot of money, and Tennessee was just not willing to go there, especially with David Sanders Jr. on campus and ready to move over to left tackle. Now Tennessee in the market for a tackle or an offensive lineman. You do have Jesse Perry. So that was obviously a big one, although not a surprise. The big surprise to me was Ricky Gibson, and I guess you could throw Caleb Herring in there as well. But those two just genuinely seem like they were ready to move on from Tennessee, unfortunately, if you're a Vol fan.
Yeah, I'll start with Hurd. You kind of touched on it there. It was sort of I don't want to say a tricky tackle situation for Tennessee, but I mean, to me, from what I heard, David Sanders Jr. was going to play left tackle next season. And if it wasn't going to be at Tennessee, it was going to be at somewhere else. So I don't think Tennessee wanted to chance anything there. And I don't think Lance wanted to move to right tackle. I suppose you had the Darnell Wright pitch, right? Because Darnell started at left tackle as a junior and then moved over to the right side and still got drafted in the top 10. And he's obviously on a huge rookie contract and playing well for the Bears. So that could have been the pitch, but then there's also the financial side of it that needed to work out too. And I don't think Tennessee wanted to go down that route. So we'll see. I think Ryan will have some more on the tackle situation. They've targeted a couple guys in the portal, so maybe that makes me think that they're looking at the portal for their right tackle and want to keep Jesse Perry at guard, with the understanding that in a pinch, if they needed to, they could kick him out there. So I'll defer to Ryan there. Caleb Herring, yeah, he's a guy that, again, former top-ranked in-state recruit that it kind of just left you wanting more. And he had opportunities this season, and I don't think he played badly. Just too many games where he just was not. I mean, he was just kind of anonymous, right? And even you could look at the Music City Bowl, and he and Jordan Ross really neither of them had a huge impact on that game. But Herring had a nice game against Georgia, a couple sacks against Mississippi State, but he started a couple games this season when Joshua Josephs was out of the lineup, but he never really quite put it all together. So maybe a change of scenery is what he needs to sort of fully maximize his potential. And I think he's been to Mississippi State, and I think Miami's been linked to him too. Ricky Gibson, I think, is, for all the talk of these portal decisions being based on playing time or money or this, that, and the other, I think that was sort of a casualty of the staff changes, because Ernest Thompson III was the de facto cornerbacks coach, and a lot of those cornerbacks and he had been in the program for a few years and had a relationship with some of these guys. So I think that might have had Ricky looking elsewhere. But certainly that's I think a big one because the cornerback situation is kind of a mess with who you didn't have this season. But starting 26, you look, hey, we'll get Ricky Gibson back and pair him with Ty Redmond would be pretty good there. Now I think that's a big portal need for you now. So, but that's just sort of the nature of it. Sometimes guys leave for different reasons, and you got to replace them. And maybe that's maybe Tennessee has sort of changed things up this year, where in the past you would do what you need to do to keep a guy like that, and now you're saying, okay, fine, you can go, and we'll go get somebody else new in the portal that maybe fits us and wants to be here. So, I would say those are the big ones. A lot of the other guys are into the roster guys. Certainly the Glenn Ellerby detractors are probably having a field day with the 2024 offensive line class being cleared out, with Satterwhite, Max Anderson, and Bennett Warren leaving. Those are all 4-star guys in that class. And you can add that to some of the other classes that didn't pan out very well in the offensive line. But I think that's a position where you can sort of piece it together with more developed, ready-made guys. And then if you just have a couple of high school guys hit, then maybe that's all you need to have a good enough offensive line. So those are the ones that stand out to me too. And we'll see what Tennessee does at kicker with Gilbert. But a lot of the other departures are into the roster guys that weren't going to be factors or weren't factors and are probably going somewhere else where maybe they have a better chance at playing.
What can people expect? You mentioned a little bit earlier in the pod, but with a trip to GoVols247 from you up at the site right now?
Well, there's a couple of running trackers, portal departures. So if obviously as we've sort of illustrated here on this podcast, there's a lot of names out there right now, guys leaving, guys visiting, guys coming in. So I've got all those names sort of grouped into 2 locations. There's a running tracker on portal targets, guys that are visiting, guys that are maybe names to watch. And then we'll see if some guys come off the board as inevitably has happened already in the fast moving world of portal recruiting. And then we've got the central place of portal departures to keep up with who Tennessee is losing to the portal. So it's all about the portal right now. Hope to have some more of an in-depth look at that Tennessee's transfer portal needs. I think you're already kind of seeing that, as Ryan will touch on here in the next segment about what positions Tennessee is prioritizing and targeting in the portal. But hope to draw that out a little bit more here in the next couple of days. And then just trying to keep up with everything that's going on. And there's a lot going on right now. So.
And Ryan has several pieces up talking to a couple of different recruits and talking to Qua Moss, who committed on Sunday, his decision on why to commit, and all of that and more at GoVols247.com. And on the other side of this break, we will get Ryan Callahan in here to discuss the latest with all of Tennessee's transfer visits. Again, on the other side of this quick timeout here on the GoVols247 podcast. Welcome back into the GoVols247 podcast. I am Ben McKee, and I am now joined by the great Ryan Callahan on this second segment of the podcast. Before we chat with Ryan and pick his brain about the latest visits that Tennessee has had Sunday, Monday, and as we get ready for Tuesday, I do need to encourage you, wherever you find your GoVols247 podcast, if you wouldn't mind going in and leaving us a review, giving us a like if you do like it, I suppose. That helps us in a big way, and we would greatly appreciate that. And Ryan is full of information at a very important time of the season. So if you want to know when we are dropping these podcasts, right when they do drop, hit that little notification bell. That way you get an alert when it does hit your podcast stream, wherever you find your podcasts. Ryan, I would ask you how you're doing, but I know you're busy. You're probably tired. I think I know how you are doing. I'm kidding. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, doing all right. We missed you in Nashville, but it was the Music City Bowl, so you were probably okay with that.
Yeah, it was the Music City Bowl. We will leave it at that. Excited to pick your brain these next couple of minutes about all things Tennessee football transfer portal. Patrick and I went through and shared some of our thoughts, but didn't really get into the visits. We are leaving the floor for you on that topic, and I'm just gonna leave the floor wide open for you. Just kind of what's the big storylines that you're paying attention to right now? If there's a Tennessee fan that's still trying to wake up from New Year's Eve and get back in the flow of life and have really been detached from Tennessee football news as it relates to the portal the last couple of days, what are some of the key points that you would share with that person?
Well, it obviously starts with some of the big defensive needs for Tennessee, and they've been pretty aggressive in hitting the secondary and edge rusher, defensive line, also doing their best to bring in some frontline help on defense that really need help at all three levels of the defense. We've seen them go out and land Qua Moss, the Kansas State defensive back transfer, and a guy that they were pretty excited about as soon as he went in the portal. And you still see them looking to add some help there in the secondary. Obviously, got the Troy cornerback, Jaquez White, that Tennessee hosted on Monday. That one looks like a Tennessee-Virginia Tech battle down the stretch here. Tennessee, I think, has some momentum coming off that visit, and we'll see if the Vols can land him. And then, the big question after that becomes if you land him, but, you need some safety help, obviously. So where's that going to come from? King Mack, a Penn State transfer, would be a possibility there, who's expected to visit later in the week. So we'll see who else they end up hosting at safety, but that's a big one to watch. Tennessee needing at least one safety in this class. Lyric Rawls from Kansas, another guy scheduled to visit on Tuesday. So Tennessee looking for potentially multiple guys there. Rawls probably more of an in the box safety, a 205-pound guy that had 70 plus tackles this year at Kansas. So pretty productive player there, but Tennessee definitely wanting to get more athletic on the back end too. So I think you'll see them look at a couple different types of safeties, and King Mack, a little bit of a different type of player that obviously is already very familiar with Anthony Poindexter and Jim Knowles and this defensive staff. That's kind of a recurring theme you see. Penn State transfers looking at Tennessee. Xavier Gillum, the defensive lineman from Penn State, visited on Monday. You still got Chaz Coleman, one of the top 10 players in the transfer portal right now on 24/7 Sports. Still on campus until Tuesday afternoon. That's a big visit for Tennessee. The Vols need some edge rusher help with Caleb Herring off to the portal. Still kind of trying to hold on with Jordan Ross and make sure he stays out of the portal. So either way, you need some help there, and definitely want to get some more depth at that position. Not a whole lot left after Emmanuel Okoye and Joshua Josephs are gone. Kellen Lindstrom, that room's kind of cleaned out with this freshman class, kind of providing the depth there. You need some immediate impact guys, and you see them trying to host Adam Trick from Miami of Ohio, another of the top-rated edge rushers in the portal right now. He's supposed to be in sometime this week. So Tennessee definitely looking for probably more than one edge rusher in this class. So it kind of all starts there on defense, but looking for some running back help as well. Zylan Perry out of Louisiana was in on Monday. Tennessee, I think, has some momentum there. Still some things they've got to sort through to see if they can add him. But we've seen the options kind of dry up there already. Hollywood Smothers off to Alabama, it looks like. And then Cam Cook from Jacksonville State appears to be headed elsewhere. So Tennessee looking for running back, probably just one at this point, but definitely need somebody capable of being kind of that 1B to Deshaun Bishop in the backfield next year. And Zylan Perry looks like maybe the best option there. And then Tennessee looking for what looks like a starting tackle, and they might have that guy in Ori Williams out of LSU, the redshirt freshman who started 2 games at right tackle this year for the Tigers. Tennessee going back to the well with LSU transfers, trying to replace Lance Hurd, and it looks like they might have found their guy. They've already canceled Anwar O'Neal's visit from Delaware. He was scheduled to be in midweek, and Tennessee called off that one. So looking pretty good for Tennessee with Ori Williams, and just trying to hold off Georgia there, which is trying to get him back or trying to get him on campus for a midweek visit before he makes a decision. But Tennessee, I think, has all the momentum there right now. And then the big one, that everyone's kind of waiting to see what if anything Tennessee does is quarterback. What happens there? Does Ty Simpson end up looking to the transfer portal? If he doesn't right now, you can't really say that Tennessee is waiting on anything other than to see if Joey Aguilar is going to be cleared. So it might be kind of Ty Simpson or bust at this point, with Tennessee having missed out already on Sam Levitt and on Brendan Sorsby in the transfer portal. Looks like the options are kind of drying up for the top end guys, unless this possibility with Ty Simpson turns out to be something. And certainly can't discount that. Josh Heupel was on the road Monday in Martin, Tennessee, stopped at Westview, and this is the time of year you kind of tend to focus on transfer targets maybe not a coincidence he ends up at Martin or in Martin to check on Ty Simpson's younger brother, Graham Simpson, and also visit with Asa Barnes and Miles Brown, two of Tennessee's in-state targets there. But yeah, obviously Ty Simpson's family there in Martin as well, and that's something to kind of keep an eye on there to see if it turns into something really worth watching here in the coming days. I think Ty Simpson will have an answer by the end of this week, probably on what he wants to do in terms of entering the draft and kind of go from there. So kind of all eyes on that quarterback situation for now, but Joey Aguilar still in play there if Tennessee doesn't get anyone else. And, you've always got the fallback plan of George McIntyre and Faison Brandon and a couple of talented young guys. So can't go wrong there, but you probably got to add somebody at quarterback and need to at least, add some depth to the room and give you another option there going into this season. But still some big questions to address, and this team's got to get better and plug some holes to get ready for 2026. Obviously an important year now, and Tennessee definitely on the defensive side in particular has a lot of needs to address.
I've got several questions for you from all of that good info that you just passed along. We'll start with Ty Simpson since that was the last thing that you touched on. Just what do you make of that situation overall, especially just because it's so odd because he's not in the transfer portal and folks are credible folks are continuing to speak about what seems to be just how realistic of an option it is that Ty Simpson could transfer to Tennessee. I understand that the belief is that he's going to enter the NFL draft, but people are speaking very boldly that if it's not the draft, that Tennessee is a real player for him.
Yeah, I think it's legitimate because Tennessee, as we saw with their involvement with Brendan Sorsby, I think for the right guy, they can be very competitive financially and are ready to make an aggressive push there for the right player. I mean, it would make a lot of sense on a couple fronts. On one hand, can Alabama be as aggressive financially as Tennessee could to hold on to Ty Simpson? Are they motivated to do that when they've got a couple of their own young guys that they might like to turn the reins over to at quarterback? Maybe not ideal to lose a guy of Ty Simpson's stature, but if he were to go, if he were to be projected as a second-round pick, there's incentive on his end maybe to come back and improve his stock and see if he can end his career back in his home state. I think he's always kind of deep down still been intrigued by this possibility of ending up back at Tennessee. It would be quite the full circle storyline for this if it played out, just the ultimate, playing the long game if you're Josh Heupel's staff. I mean, he was one of the first guys he recruited at Tennessee his first 2 months on the job, didn't land him. And, they've been recruiting his younger brother, Graham, a little bit. But, for that relationship to come full circle would be pretty wild after the way that recruitment went back in the 2022 class. So we'll see if it plays out that way. But, certainly, some questions about Tennessee's offense that need to be addressed in terms of producing NFL quarterbacks. But if you're Ty Simpson, I think you look at that offense and think, I can put up some big numbers in that system and add to what's already a pretty impressive body of work from this year at Alabama. That might help him improve his stock. And hey, he's got a chance to be kind of a home state hero if he comes back home and has a nice year for Tennessee. And it's a big deal to have that on your resume. He would be it would be kind of a heel turn moment for for Alabama if he were to pull off that switch to Tennessee. But yeah, I think there's some incentive there on his end if he's not projected as a first round pick. And I certainly can't discount the possibility. That's how these portal things tend to work. Obviously at Kentucky, Cutter Boley wasn't in the transfer portal until he was, and then it became a very real possibility for Arizona State to land him. So that we saw Tennessee back in the spring go after some guys like Rocco Becht at Iowa State and Avery Johnson at Kansas State, Josh Hoover out of TCU. None of them entered the portal, but we know Tennessee at least made overtures. In this case, you've got a ready-made relationship there to kind of reach out and let them know you're interested, and that's the way the portal works. So in this case, it would make some sense. There's obviously a need there for Tennessee, and it could be a big deal for Tennessee if they can make that happen. But it's obviously only a possibility until Ty Simpson actually enters the portal and decides he's going to come back to college football next year.
At the running back position, were you surprised that they targeted Hollywood Smothers in terms of that tier of running back, going out and getting a guy that could be a superstar, or the better way that you put it was kind of that 1B? Were you surprised that they were fishing and may still be fishing in that tier 1? Whereas I think I am a little bit, just because I thought they might go more the Star Thomas caliber of player route.
Yeah, and I think that's where they're going to end up. Honestly, with Zylan Perry out of Louisiana, he is much more of even being a Louisiana native, much more of a Star Thomas type back, split carries at Louisiana, a little bit more affordable option there. You're battling Cincinnati for him. But yeah, they were very interested in getting a top tier guy if they could get someone. The problem is there's just other programs that are just as motivated, if not more so, to get a star running back. Alabama really wanted Hollywood Smothers, had a connection there. Sounds like it's going to work out for the Crimson Tide. So, there are teams out there that needed starting running backs in Tennessee. Still kind of waiting on David Gabriel Georgia in the 2027 class out of Baylor School. You don't want to bring in someone that might block him or scare him away, but at the same time, there's a clear need there. And Tennessee's only got 3 scholarship backs at the moment, with Justin Baker, the freshman from Buford, who didn't play much this year, being one of them. It's going to be DeJuan Morris, Deshaun Bishop, and whoever you bring in here out of the portal, and that's not a lot of depth. And you need to be ready to go offensively this year, and hope to have a good run game to go along with whatever your quarterback situation is. So it's a big need, and I think Tennessee's poised to address it here. But yeah, I think there was a real desire to upgrade there if they could. It's just there are other programs that want to back just as much as they did, and it's sometimes tough to land those types of guys. Thought Cam Cook might work out a little bit better than it has so far, but the Jacksonville State transfer, obviously still looking around, and it looks like Tennessee's got some ground to make up in that one as of right now. So and you've got some other needs to address. Again, defense is kind of where a lot of the resources have gone, and you've obviously got to be prepared to do whatever's necessary to try to get a guy like Ty Simpson at quarterback. So you can't afford to address every position with a top tier player, but there was definitely a desire to go and get a top of the line running back if they could find one. It's just when you're looking for kind of a 1B type instead of a starter, it's sometimes hard to devote the necessary resources to that position to win a big time bidding war essentially in the transfer portal.
What are your thoughts on Tennessee and its secondary, more so in the sense, I know you kind of went through it earlier here in the segment, but just how many numbers we could see Tennessee target in the secondary? Obviously, with Qua Moss, it seems like they've secured their nickel for next season. You mentioned trying to get one safety in the boat. So I guess more so asking about corner, especially in the wake of Ricky Gibson electing to transfer. How many corners do you see Tennessee going after? Because obviously it appears Ty Redmond is set to return. Based off of his tweet the other night. That's one starting corner. You probably need somebody on the other side of him because you just don't have any obvious in-house options at the moment. So do you think that they're just looking for a starter, or do you think they'll be looking for depth at that corner position as well?
I think just a starter. I think Qua Moss will end up being some of that depth. I know he's rated as a safety on 24/7 Sports, but he's a guy they envision playing nickel and corner, it sounds like. So he's kind of that Jalen McMurray replacement, I think, a guy that can play inside or out. And then you need that starter, as you said, to kind of plug in opposite Ty Redmond. And that is a loss there, having Ricky Gibson go to the portal. But I think the freshman class should give you a couple additional options there. Trey Poteet and some of those guys didn't play probably as much as Tennessee would have liked this past year, but you got some good athletes coming in, Javonte Smith and Zay Anderson in state, and Jamian Theodore as well out of Baylor School in Chattanooga. Those guys are going to have to provide some meaningful depth this year. I think the other big thing is you got to bring in some legitimate safety help, and that's where probably there's an even bigger need maybe than at corner. You don't want to leave yourself high and dry with few options at corner, but safety is just where the cupboard's much thinner. It feels like Idris Farouk, the one safety coming back in the starting lineup. You've got Sidney Walton that played some this year, but there's a real desire to upgrade that position and bring in some really reliable players, and that's a big part of Jim Knowles' defense as well. So I think they've got to get better there, and still looking for a linebacker for that matter. On top of that, but it didn't mention Kamori House, the North Carolina transfer, played for William Inge at Washington a couple of years ago. He's in town at Tennessee until Tuesday morning on a visit. And then Amari Campbell, another Penn State transfer, another guy that Tennessee's hoping to host on a visit here pretty quickly once he is officially in the portal. Another Penn State tie there that Tennessee is hoping to take advantage of. So just needs across the board defensively, and I think you'll still see Tennessee try to add multiple defensive linemen. So they're going to bring in several defensive players here. It looks like it's just a matter of kind of making sure the numbers all add up and you get what you need there. But in the secondary, I think you're looking at probably 4 total defensive backs by the time it's all said and done. If Tennessee can get a couple safeties they like, throw those guys in there with the corner and your nickel and Qua Moss, and could have a really different looking secondary there with a lot more experience going into 2026.
Last thing, last thing before we get you out of here, just where do you feel Tennessee is at with Xavier Gilman along the defensive line after his visit? And I know Chaz Coleman's visit, the other Penn State defensive lineman, more of an edge rusher, but his visit wraps up Tuesday, but seems like it was a big win to at least get him to campus after surviving the LSU visit over the weekend.
Yeah, that's a big one for Tennessee. I think you're going to see Tennessee make a pretty aggressive push there to try to land him while he's in town. The plan, at least as far as we know, is for him to go to Ohio State next, and you don't want him taking that visit if you're Tennessee. It's a kid from Warren, Ohio. Ohio State was the runner-up to Penn State coming out of high school, one of the top players in the transfer portal. We've seen Tennessee win bidding wars with Ohio State in the past, but sometimes Ohio State, especially with a home state kid, can get a little bit of a hometown discount. We saw Carnell Tate essentially take less money to go to Ohio State a couple years ago. Those kinds of situations can play out that way, especially for a guy that's from Ohio originally. So if you're Tennessee, you don't want him getting away and going to Columbus for that visit. You want to find a way to shut that one down and land him. And I think Tennessee's pretty motivated, but again, how much does that connection to Jim Knowles and the rest of the guys on his staff, how much does that play into Tennessee's favor? And how much does I guess how motivated are they to win a big time bidding war? Because obviously LSU made a big push, had him taking pictures with a car on campus over the weekend and doing what they can with Lane Kiffin's staff to land him as well. But I think Tennessee has a real shot there, at least in that one. And we'll just kind of have to see what he says coming out of the visit on Tuesday. Xavier Gillam, that is, I think that's one. It's a realistic option for Tennessee for sure. He's going to Notre Dame after Tennessee was at Indiana over the weekend. Obviously, Indiana's become a very different type of program to look at in the transfer portal these days, winning some big battles and getting a chance to play for a national championship this year. I think Tennessee's got a real shot with Gillam. He might be a more realistic option on the defensive line compared to Mateen Igorogba, I believe is how you pronounce it. The Wake Forest transfer. I believe I might have butchered that name, but it's
good enough. We'll give you an A+ for the effort.
Mateen Igorogba. But he is, he's the other guy that Tennessee's been after, hoping to get him on a midweek visit. But Gillam might be the more realistic option at this point, with Texas Tech looking like they're in there pretty firmly with Igorogba. And Tennessee's still looking for multiple guys, I think, on the defensive line if you can get them. So ideally, some would get a couple guys there up front to go along with an edge rusher or two. So still would not be surprised if more names surface there on the defensive line, and Tennessee needs to sort of restock the cupboard there. Big need with Bryson Eason and Jackson Moy and Tyree West all on the way out the door. So Dominic Bailey as well. So some big shoes to fill there, a lot of snaps to fill. And you've got some second-year guys who'll be ready to take on bigger roles in 2026, you would think, Isaiah Campbell and Ethan Utley and some of those guys, but you probably need some experience to offset some of those losses too. And that's where Tennessee's got to get better. They've got to stop the run better than they did in 2025, got to get after the quarterback better. And that's certainly going to be a big part of Jim Knowles' defense. I'm also interested in seeing how much bigger do they try to get up front? How many edge rushers do they try to play at once? I think they are trying to play a little bit different style. Jim Knowles' pass has been more with sort of 2 edge rushers on the field, bigger defensive tackles. Do we see that kind of show up with this year, or does Rodney Garner's style that he's kind of gone with, the smaller, more active defensive lineman, is that the direction Tennessee continues to go? Xavier Gillam looks like kind of a bigger body type at defensive tackle, around 300 pounds. Ibarogba certainly, in that same range. You got some bigger guys in town, so Tennessee could use those body types to go along with David Hobbs, but they've got some interesting possibilities on the defensive line, and we'll be fascinated to see kind of who they end up with. But I think they've got to get multiple bodies up there to sort of restock the cupboard across the defensive front.
It's been a busy several days for the Vols in the transfer portal, and of course, Ryan, it's a great time to check out GoVols247.com and all of your great coverage.
Yeah, lots of things to keep track of, a lot of irons in the fire, and we'll have all these visit updates coming along, and Tennessee's coaches going back on the road, as we were reminded with Josh Heupel out on the road Monday. So we'll see where Tennessee's new assistants end up going on the road this week, and All-Star games. We got the All-American Bowl going on in San Antonio this week. Some Tennessee signees down there. So a lot going on. Junior days coming up, but obviously the transfer portal front and center, and we'll have all that covered for you over the next couple weeks as these visits continue. Midweek visits, probably some visits into next weekend as well. Tennessee looking to address several needs, and we'll have it all covered for you at GoVols247. And you can sign up right now for 50% off an annual subscription. No better time to join the site and get all that coverage than right now.
And as a disclaimer and reminder, just remember how quickly things are changing in the transfer portal. So
yes,
I am going to publish this podcast right away, but please do remember that things are changing with the wind and could change by the time you listen to this podcast. So we're doing our best to make sure we get the content out there before things do change, but please keep that in mind as you are listening. And we certainly do appreciate you listening, and we will be back later in the week with a fresh updated podcast, as well as I'm sure 10 names will be added to the board by the end of the week. For Patrick Brown in the first segment, Ryan Callahan in the second segment, I'm Ben McKee. This has been another edition of the GoVols247 Podcast.